Hello students, welcome back to the week 3 of Introduction to Cultural Studies, and I hope that you're having a good time, especially in this extended weekend, the MLK weekend. So I hope that you're with family and with your loved ones. Because this is the extended holiday weekend, we were not gathering at our normal times, so I'm just sending this pre-recorded material, which you only have to see at your own in your own time, and it will suffice and it will cover your attendance and participation. Next week we will start meeting again, and normally in the regular scheduled times, which means that we will be seeing each other through Zoom. But according to your discussion section, we will be meeting either by 2 p.m. or 3 or 5 p.m. depending on the discussion section that you're enrolled in. So that is it. As an introduction, I wanted to continue to keep unpacking the readings of the syllabus to hopefully help you prepare for the first examination that you will be having soon. If you want more information on the examination, please check the syllabus for dates as well as for additional information on what is it about. But I wanted to pick things up where we left, which is I wanted to recover the reading that I didn't get the chance to discuss in the last video that I sent you by Louis Althusser. There's a couple of concepts that we did review from this reading during the lectures, but I wanted to highlight something that we didn't get the chance to unpack in a little bit more detail, that I thought it was quite interesting, and that hopefully it will help you to navigate this text as well. So welcome once again, and here we go. Let us start with the first essay, Ideology and Ideological State Apparatuses, right? This is from Louis Althusser. The author is making a differentiation between ideological state apparatuses and repressive state apparatuses. He mentions that usually the repressive state apparatus is the one that can be illustrated through prisons, courts, the police, the army, right? And administration in general. And because they usually function through violence, they can exercise violence on people, right? Legitimately and legally speaking. Whereas the ideological state apparatus, normally think of a school, is normally not operating or functioning through violence, right? This is main differentiation that we're doing here. However, there are exceptions for both cases, right? The repressive state apparatus could be ideological, somehow could be also right, transmitting and reproducing cultural ideas, while at the same time the ideological state apparatus, a school, for instance, a school teacher could be using violence, right, on the students, even though that shouldn't be happening, but that would be an excuse, an extreme case for thinking about when the ideological state apparatus, or someone that conceptually speaking could be understood within the ideological state apparatus, could be considered as exercising violence, and hence it could be understood as part of the repressive state apparatus as well. What is interesting here that I wanted to mention that from this article is mostly towards the end of the second half of the text, and I think that what is relevant to me is that the author is discussing that ideology indeed always exists in an apparatus, either the ideological state apparatus as the schools, or the repressive state apparatuses as the army, the police, and the administration, and so on, right? But so that is the main thesis that I want to highlight in here. According to Althusser, ideology always exists in an apparatus and its practice or practices. That is what I thought it was such a crucial idea, because it's elevating the whole conversation, not only on the level of ideas and intricate and complicated ideas, but to the level of the body and the level of matter, of things that are concrete, right? The author is saying in page 82, this existence is material, right? So I think that sometimes when we're discussing culture or ideology, we mistakenly might consider, oh, it's just about a bunch of like ideas, abstract ideas or abstract constructs that are just out there almost like floating in the ether. But to the contrary, the author is saying, no, ideology is always, can be always encountered or always exists within an apparatus. That's the first thesis. And second, it's always material because it is transmitted and is executed through practices, concrete practices, right? An individual, for instance, believes in God. That example that the author brought, I thought it was quite useful. He said, recovering this case of someone who has an actual faith in God, right? He says that the reason why they do so, right, is because they attend mass. They are kneeling down, they are praying, they are confessing, which are all saliently practices, right? So he's saying if you don't believe in God, it's because you are not engaging in those concrete, corporeal, material practices, right? So there you go, as a way to think about religion or belief or a belief system, which is also part of ideology, not only as this abstract set of ideas, but he's saying they reside, they exist in a material form. If you start doing those practices, crucially, you will start believing in that ideology, that because that there in those material concrete practices is where ideology resides, right? Not in the ether. And so that is an important assertion that I wanted to highlight here because it's going to be re-emerging in the next article that we need to discuss by Walter Benjamin. He is discussing how these practices, right? Now I'm on page 83, how these practices point out in the direction of rituals. He's saying that these material concrete practices are governed by rituals in which these practices are inscribed, right? And in that way, that is how they recover their material existence. You know, from a ritualistic mindset, it's all about what you do, right? Is about rituals are comprised of a specific set of actions performed in a specific order or because of a specific intention, but nonetheless, they are a concrete set of actions, right? That is why the author is saying towards the end, I shall say, where only a single subject, such and such an individual, is concerned, the existence of the ideas of his belief is material, and that his ideas are his material actions inserted into material practices governed by material rituals, which are themselves defined by the material ideological apparatus from which derive the ideas of that subject. That is kind of like a very dense but very complete consolidation or summary of all the ideas in this specific article. And we could add, okay, if ideology is always within an apparatus, and if ideology is always material and it's always existing through specific practices, which ideologies do I sustain and reproduce based on the practices that I have, right? If you can think of not only the ideas that you hold, not only the ideas that you perpetuate and that you disseminate and that you share with others, but actually if you think of the common, almost ritualistic, repetitive practices that you engage in, they might be a good way to understand what are the core ideas that you sustain within yourself, right? About yourself, about the world, about your body, about what's good, about what's desirable, about what's attractive, about what it is disgusting, right? All of those values or ideas could be made more palpable if we highlight the practices that we engage in on a daily basis. So I'm going to finish off this article by highlighting two short ideas that are mentioned on the page 84 of this same article that says, number one, there is no practice except by and in an ideology. So that means that it is not possible to say, oh, I only do those things, don't worry about that, I just do those things. There's not an actual like thought or an idea behind it. And here Althusser is saying there is no practice except by and in an ideology. So whether we want to see the ideology behind our practices and actions or not, there is an ideology in there, right? There's no such thing as a neutral action, as a, oh, I just do those things, don't worry about that, I don't actually have any thought behind it. He's saying no, there's always an ideology behind our actions. There's no, and idea number two here is there's no ideology except by the subject and for subjects, right? So here what is relevant is to consider how to become a subject, right, is to be subjected by at the same time. When it comes to ideologies, that is, or ideology, that is what the author is trying to invoke through the concept of interpolation, right? That an ideology is interpolating you by saying, hey, I'm an idea and I need someone to carry me through. I need someone whose practices can reflect and disseminate me, right? I'm just like trying to turn it into almost like a theatrical representation, but that is sort of like how I understand this article, right? That interpolation, the process of interpolation of ideology is, remember how Professor Rodenbeck was mentioning, is how whenever the feeling that you get when the police says, hey, you, and you turn around, right, and you feel like, oh, that you is me, that moment you become a subject, you become the you, and at the same time you become subjected to the power of the police agent in that case, but it could be many other agents, right? Not necessarily, that is just an example. We're not only dealing with police authority, right? So that is what the couple of notes that I wanted to end on for that article that I didn't get the chance to completely review in the last week. But now take a deep breath, because we're about to jump into the second article of this review, which is by Walter Benjamin. So the second article that we need to be reviewing is a classical, this is a classic text that you will be probably encountering over and over again, not only in your academic experience, if you continue doing your master's or anything like that, you will encounter it also in popular culture and films and television, because this is a key work. Walter Benjamin, as well as some of the authors that we were reviewing this last week, they were writing in the specific historical moment of the wave of fascism that was impacting Europe, right? So they were trying to think of what are the ideas that we can formulate, what are the new concepts, what are the new frameworks that we can produce, right, to deal with and to survive the fascism that was happening, right, with Mussolini in Italy, with the Nazi empire, or the Nazi wave, right, in Germany. It also happened in Spain as well with Franco, but this is just the historical political context for this essay, right? Because this essay is about art. This is about art in times of fascism. So hopefully it will resonate with you. I thought it was an incredible piece that I've encountered a couple of times already in my academic preparation, but it keeps giving and flourishing in many incredible ways. So I hope that you enjoyed reading it, and now I'm gonna proceed into highlighting what are the little Easter eggs or the nuggets that I thought were quite substantial and relevant, right, from this text. So here we go with the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction. So there's a preface to the text, and what is relevant in that preface is that the author, he's saying, oh, there's so many ways, right, in which people would or theoreticians will deal with art, right? There are notions of creativity, there are notions of the individual genius, there are notions around formalism in art, but he's saying, I'm not gonna be dealing with none of those because I'm mostly gonna be dealing with a theory of art that is completely useless for the purposes of fascism. And what is relevant there is that you can then infer that, okay, maybe past frameworks could be incorporated by fascism, right? If he's saying what it's about to come now in these lines below is completely useless for fascism, then maybe you think, okay, what are the ideas that are useful for fascism, right, when it comes to art? Because, and this is one of the first bangers of this text, because he's saying that, Walter Benjamin is saying that fascism at the core, what fascism is, if we're talking about fascism, we need to conceptualize it somehow. According to the author, fascism is the inclusion, the incorporation of aesthetics into the realm of politics, right? The minute that you have an aesthetic imperative as part of your political agenda, that is fascism, right? He's saying the minute that politicians already have an aesthetic, an artistic / aesthetic idea of what is better than, or what is more beautiful than, what is more adequate than, more valuable than, that is fascism, right? And to the contrary, what he's trying to say, Walter Benjamin, in this preface, he's saying, I'm about to produce a theory, I'm about to offer you concepts that operate in the opposite way. So not the inclusion of aesthetics or art into politics, but the inclusion of politics into art, right? So understanding what are the politics in the art, what new politics could we be transmitting or conveying through new aesthetics, through new styles in art, right? And that is relevant because I will personally connect that to the conversation that we were just having in terms of practices and ideology, right? If Althusser was saying every practice is already ideological, there's no practice unless it's ideological, right? Let's extrapolate that idea and think about the realm of art. You could say then that there's no artistic practice without an ideology, right? No one could say, oh no, it was just art, I was just like drawing anything. I didn't really care of the colors that I was using, or like the shapes that I was painting, or the techniques or the medium that I was using. It's just art. He's saying from Althusser's perspective, we can think, no, that was already conveying an ideology. And in terms of Walter Benjamin, we could say art is already conveying a certain politics, right? And so that is why he's trying to sort of exacerbate that and say, okay, I really want to think about what are the politics contained in art so that we stop doing or walking in the opposite direction, which is to include arts and aesthetics into the realm of politics, right? So that art doesn't become, or aesthetics do not become tools for politicians, but the other way around, right? Thinking about how artists can produce and magnify the political, the ideological discourse in their own practice, right? To recover the terms from Althusser. So as you can see, while you are reading this document, you will see that it's divided into sections. So section, right now I'm going through section number 1, and he's highlighting, Walter Benjamin is highlighting the crucial transformations that art went through because of reproducibility, or because of its reproduction, as the title says, right? So the Walter Benjamin is trying to think of what was the difference between manual forms of reproducing art versus the mechanical reproduction of art, right? That is why he's sort of emphasizing photography and film, because he's interested not in any sort of reproduction of art as when I just see a painting and I try to reproduce it with my hand. No, he's focusing on the mechanical reproduction. That is a reproduction of art that it's mediated by machines, right? And there's super interesting to like follow the argument of this text and trying to think of the current machines that we have, because this article came decades and decades ago. It's already a relatively old article, again a classic, a very important piece of scholarship. But this is from the 20th century. It's from, I believe it's like from 1930 something. I'm not really sure what is the year, but it's definitely in the first half of the 20th century. So if we're dealing with fascism, or yeah, addressing the historical wave of fascism in Europe, I reckon that it has to be 1945, 1948, around those years. It has to be. Let's locate it in those years mentally to think of what kind of machines were they dealing with or trying to make sense of versus the machines that we are trying to make sense of right now, right? So in section number 1, he's studying or dwelling on the mechanical reproduction of art. What are the repercussions of such reproduction, right? And how it takes it away from the traditional form. He's focusing on that quite a lot, thinking of how before that, right, you had traditions to reproduce culture, right? Like, so a master will teach a student how to paint in a specific way, or how to create sculptures in a specific style. But then mechanical reproduction takes that transmission, the process of transmission, out of tradition, and it's just a mechanical reproduction, right? What is relevant in the section number 2 of this article is that he's sort of trying to dive philosophically into why does it matter? Okay, you're telling me that a mechanical reproduction is different than a manual reproduction of art. So what? You might say, like, okay, is it faster? Is it just like quicker? Is it more effective? And what are the philosophical connotations stemming from that? And he's saying even the most perfect reproduction of a work of art is lacking one element: its presence in time and space. So he's saying, right, because the Mona Lisa it's located in a specific space, in a specific galleria inside of the Louvre in museum in Paris, right? If you take a photo of it, if you take a video of it, an HD 4K video of it, it's a great reproduction, as the author is saying. It's an almost perfect reproduction of the work of art, but it's lacking one single important and crucial element. It is not occupying the same time and space, right? It is not occupying. It doesn't have the same presence, right, than the original artwork. Its unique existence is not being substituted by the reproduction, as perfectly mechanical as it can be or not. And why is that relevant? Well, because presence, according to Walter Benjamin, is the prerequisite for the concept of authenticity. So when you say, oh, is this artwork authentic or not? And you can think of museums and curators, right, at museums, when they say, is this art piece or authentic or not? Well, people will consider, experts will consider that in terms of its originality, and they will try to trace, right, through time and space, the presence of that object, right, tracing the objecthood of that painting, saying, oh, so it was sold by this person to this other person, and then so instead of being in this person's house, then it was transferred to this other person's flat, and then after that it was sold to the government, and then after that it entered the museum. And so they are tracing, right, the presence of that art piece across times and spaces, right? But what he's claiming is that the fact that you have a reproduction is of any art piece is not substituting it it's not occupying the same time and space than the original piece, right? And there are even more implications that we can think from that, right? The author is saying that that now, because of that mechanical reproduction, right, it's not only that we are pilgrims traveling from one museum to the other. Now we have images traveling to us, right? So, and this is like more than 70, 60 years after this text was written. And so there was no social media whatsoever. There was no such a thing as YouTube or streaming services, but they were able to already understand what was the progression of technology, right? Especially the technology that is reproducing images, right? And they are thinking of how, yeah, before there was a pilgrimage, right? Like people needed to go, especially if you think of early paintings, right? They were attached to specific buildings. So if you wanted to see the Sistine Chapel, for instance, you needed to be a pilgrim, you needed to take on a journey and go to Italy, you needed to go there and pay your ticket and be amazed by that work of art in front of you. But now, right, we have the Sistine Chapel. We can see it as a mouse pad, as we can have a T-shirt with it. We can have it as the wallpaper on our phones or the desktop background. So those images are getting to us as well, right? There's a different operation happening there. The authenticity of the thing, of the artwork, is the essence of all that is transmissible from its beginning. This is important, ranging from its substantive duration to its testimony to the history which it has experienced. All of that represents the authenticity of an object. So if that authenticity is being interrupted, right, historically, it means that you don't know anymore how that object has been consistently been traveling across the spaces and times. And what is really jeopardized when the historical testimony of an artwork, what really is affected is the authority of the object, right? If you have lost that historical accuracy, if you don't know anymore how the authentic artwork was traveling across times and spaces, then its authority has been diminished, right? And then Walter Benjamin is saying that what has been diminished, what has been eliminated, right, is the aura. That is another key element from this text, is the aura of an art piece, right? If we have lost the sense of authenticity, if all of a sudden I don't even know, amidst all these copies, I don't even know which one is the original. Like before we only had one, but now I see the same image over and over on my phone, and I see like so many replicas, and there's even many museums that claim to have the original painting by, I don't know, Leonardo da Vinci, and they have different, right, like historical lineages. Then amidst that confusion, right, amidst this mechanical reproduction, the aura, the auratic value of the work is diminished. There's not an aura anymore. Before people it will almost be a religious experience to go and see a painting, right? There was nowhere else in the world that could offer you that specific experience of having that painting, that Leonardo da Vinci in front of you. But then because of mechanical reproduction, that aura, that auratic value of the piece is diminished, right? Then I'm jumping into the portion number 3 of the text, and here the author is talking about how pieces before they were supposed to be, or they were expected to be seen by individuals. Like sometimes it will be a one-on-one relationship, right? A viewer and a work of art, and that was it. But then because of the emergence of mediated society, and because of the technological progression and having all these other media that will allow us to not only to see, to access these different images or artworks, but also allowing for those artworks to get to us as well, then we start arriving into the mass consumption of art, right? Which is something that we will be touching upon through several authors on this throughout this quarter. So that is important to think about. And in this section, then in section number 4, what is relevant here that I wanted to highlight for you is that someone would say, okay, so that sounds like an abstract concept to think of the erotic value of an art piece and how it has been diminished amidst the mechanical reproduction of its mechanical reproduction, right? So why do we think of that? Well, the author is thinking about the aura of an art piece because he is thinking about how in an industrial society, in a mediated society, we have lost the value of a ritual, right? And he says that that was the original intention behind any art piece, that people will create art for its ritualistic / magical value, right? So he's making the example of a caveman that was trying to communicate or like understand or just dwell on fire or on an animal, and so they will start painting it on a cave, right? And he was saying, and eventually maybe they will show it to someone else because, yeah, why not? But that was not the main purpose of art. It was not so that others will see it. It was an immersive experience into something. If you are a caveman, a cavewoman, and you've never experienced fire, or let's just imagine for a second that you see fire for the first time, it must have been such a transformational experience that maybe you kept thinking about it and you kept imagining it. And then if you had the chance to paint something, you would probably paint that image of the fire, but it was mostly because it was something that was in you, was something that you were thinking about, almost obsessing about, right? Not so that other people will come and say, oh, that was beautiful, you really captured the image of the fire quite accurately, that was a really good portrayal. So he's Walter Benjamin is talking about how art is in an industrial mediated society losing its ritualistic value, its erratic value, right? And instead is gaining this exhibitional value. So he's saying that nowadays, like the core value giver for an art piece is how much it can be seen, right? How many people have seen this exhibition by this famous artist? Has this artwork been exhibited and presented at the most reputed venues for art? I don't know, MoMA and Tate Modern in London, or the Contemporary Art Museum in Indianapolis. All these institutions, right, keep adding to the value of the art piece in our times. Now it's about visibility and about how many people have seen it and how many documentaries are made about the artist and the artwork. But he's saying that is a complete shift from the original value behind an art piece, which again was for people to explore their psyche, explore their mind, explore their concerns or even their obsessions, right? But the instant the criterion of authenticity ceases to be applicable to artistic production, the total function of art is reversed, right? If we are just actually concerned about how many likes this piece of content has and how many times it has been reshared, right? It's hard to think about the authentic, the original quality of anything, right? We are, in our generation, we are used to this. We have been raised with this. We are actually swimming in a sea of replicas and copies, and we don't even know who started this meme or that meme. It's just like, oh, I might even have done it myself, and oh, you did it too, great. So it's like just copies after copies, right? Versus, right, a sense of oh, I want to know which one is the original the authentic object with its original aura, right? Instead of being based on ritual, Walter Benjamin says, the piece of art begins to be based on another practice, politics. So that is interesting to think about, because on one end you might think, oh, so it's something negative that we don't have the ritualistic value of the art piece. But then on the other end, it seems like the author is highlighting this emerging new value, right? The politics of where is the art piece being presented at, right? There's a politics to that as well, of, oh, this artist is being represented here and exhibited there, and then all these collectors and curators are interested in this art piece. So there's a politics to that, how visible, how successful that art piece is. And don't forget that at the end of the day, what Walter Benjamin is trying to think about or to produce is a framework, a theoretical framework, or a set of concepts that will be useful for exacerbate the political force within an art piece, as opposed to what we were discussing that fascism is, which is the instrumentalization, the integration of aesthetics into the realm of politics, right? So then I'm moving quickly into sections 7 or 8 so that I have the time to go through the other papers on this of this week. I thought, quite frankly, I thought this was the most important article, and it's such a foundational text, right? But then in the last portions of the text, the author is mentioning how there is a blending, right? Especially because of the dissemination of technological devices, right? There's a dissemination between the audience and the authors of the pieces, right? And now, can't you imagine if he was thinking about or concerned about how the proportions between those that were able to create an art piece and those that were only audiences, right? Nowadays, that boundary is like even more, it's even thinner, right? Because all of us have a phone with a camera, so all of us could potentially be an artist, do a video, take a shot, take a picture of something. And now, just to finish off this text by Walter Benjamin, I wanted to just go right before the epilogue, what it says. Of course, thinking within this conversation of the reproducibility of art, within this conversation of the diminishing value of ritual and the disappearance of the aura of authentic and original objects, he's talking about film and photography, because these are the quintessential machines that he had to think about in his time. We need to do the similar operation for AI, for virtual reality, right, for blockchain, for the technologies of our time. But he's saying, he's talking about the reception of film, right? And he says reception in a state of distraction is increasing noticeably in all fields of art, and is symptomatic of profound changes in perception. Finds in the film its true means of exercise. The film, with its shocked effect, meets this mode of reception halfway. The film makes the cult value recede into the background, not only by putting the public in the position of the critic, but also, this is super important, by the fact that at the movies, this position, to be in the position of the critic, requires no attention. The public is an examiner, but an absent-minded one. And so again, just bringing that into our context of social media, there's been so many alarming pieces of research that I'm sure you've been exposed to, talking about our diminishing capacity for attention and the attention span because of TikTok, because of short format videos. And so I'm just wondering, what would Walter Benjamin think of those technologies if he was already concerned because of film and photography, right? But then in the epilogue, he says fascism sees its salvation in giving these masses, the subaltern masses, not the right, but instead a chance to express themselves. And so, what he's theorizing here, now that we are reaching the end of the article, he's saying the a fascist regime is all about aesthetics, is all about technology, but it's trying to repress the redistribution of wealth within a society. He's talking about how the normal evolution, the normal progression of technology is that, okay, technology keeps evolving, so it should make people's lives easier for everyone, right? But fascism is intervening and saying, not for everyone, though, not for everyone. And so that is what Walter Benjamin is trying to theorize, right? He's saying, in a fascist regime, technology is available for everyone, but the limits of that is for a distribution, right, of a redistribution of the property system. This is in the last page of the document, right? So that is why we end up with the notion of it's just art for art's sake. It doesn't really matter. Nothing really matters. There's no really an intention behind it. It's just pure aesthetics, right? And that is why he's coming up with this article, trying to think of, wait, no, how can we make a politics, a different kind of politics, or engage in a different kind of politics through the art piece, right? Using art and using aesthetics as a way to, right, maybe construct and build an alternative kind of politics that reverses or at least balances out, I will think, the opposing operation, which is to capitalize the value or instrumentalize the value of arts and aesthetics for a political agenda. So that is the end of the article by Walter Benjamin. Then in the next one for that day, we had the cultural industry, Enlightenment as Mass Deception by Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno. These are also quite big names in cultural theory, in social sciences, right? But I recognize it's quite a complicated read, and I think I will only encourage you to go through it. Don't get frustrated if you feel like, oh, I'm not getting it. Just keep going through it, almost like bathing in those waters, and see what you can retain, see what makes sense. There's a lot of value in this reading, but I think because these authors are from not only from a different culture but from a different time, I guess the style of it's quite difficult to grasp, right? But what I will highlight is that they are talking about how there's a very calculated style when it comes to movies and when it comes to films, the film industry, right? So as Professor Rodenbeck mentioned, these authors ended up being in Hollywood and trying to understand dynamics of film production, right? And it's interesting because we just covered that article by Walter Benjamin thinking about the mindless reception of films, right? And films are arguably a big portion of the cultural life of Americans, right? And now Horkheimer and Theodor Adorno, they are thinking about how the punchlines, the tragedy of the hero's journey, the recuperation of that tragedy, or that the overcoming of those hoops and tribulations, they are saying it's so calculated that at this point, now we have naturalized. We're like, oh yeah, it's the film industry, it's like the cultural industry. But for them, in their time, it was such a cultural reset to call it a cultural industry, right? They were like, how could you say that industry is gonna be commodified? How could you think that the production of images and art is going to be swallowed by an entire industry? That is unthinkable. But again, 60 or 70 years later, for us, we take it as like, oh yeah, there's just another industry that produces the images that we consume and the stories that we like and the characters that we allow into our homes, right? We have normalized that, oh yeah, it's just a cultural industry that caters that. But the authors are kind of like, I would say, highly critical of the style in which these films are done. And they are not only addressing films exclusively, they are also talking about songs and the hit songs and the hit acts, right? So they are talking about, I guess, different media, theater and movies and music, but they are trying to understand how mass culture, right, is about increasing the chances of those pieces for becoming successful, right? And so they are trying to be critical of that, and that connects really well with the article that we read for the next day for last Thursday by Stuart Hall, Encoding and Decoding. We were thinking with that one, we were thinking about how what is how culture is needed both in the moment of encoding a cultural product as well as in the moment of decoding it, right? In the moments when we are trying to receive it or perceive it, right? And then I will connect, I'm trying to highlight just in this last couple of minutes the core ideas of the other readings. Dick Hebdige was talking about in the article From Culture to Hegemony, Subculture, how radical it is to see someone, right? He's talking about the context of the UK, how radical it was for adults to see the newer generations listening to the Sex Pistols and listening to punk music and presenting themselves in different ways. What he's saying is that aesthetic contrast of like, wait, you guys look different, like what's happening, you're dressing in a different way than we dress. He's saying that is, right, a challenge towards ideology, because we were saying in the first video that I sent to you and at the beginning of this conversation as well, we were saying if ideology is not just a set of ideas, if ideology is something that is concretely materialized in practices such as how I dress, how I look, the kind of makeup I use, how I arrange my hair, the colors that I choose for my clothing, if we already agreed that that is ideological, if you stop following the ideology, then it's going to be noticeable, right? So what he's saying, the author Dick Hebdige is saying, is that in the UK it was not only an aesthetic contrast, it was not only an aesthetic contradiction, it was more than anything the evidence of how younger generations come with a different ideology. And that is why it was so alarming in the media. And he makes a review of how the media was covering the emergence of pop and punk, and the punk movement in the UK. The conclusion is, if it was just aesthetic, if it was just artistic, people would say, oh, okay, just dress however you want, I just don't like it, but you do whatever, I just have a different aesthetic, I just have a different artistic take. But if we connect that to the conversation we've been having here, we will say no, because ideologies are in there. So if you're challenging how I dress, if you're dressing in a different way, you are showing that my way of dressing is not the only one, first and foremost, and second of all, that is as created, is as crafted, as artificially curated as yours. The fact that there's someone who looks different, that is, on an aesthetic level, if they look different, they convey a different ideology, or through the terms of Walter Benjamin, we will say they are, through those artistic choices, through those colors, those shapes, right, those fabrics, that kind of music, like punk music, through those artistic choices, they are conveying different politics. Then that is why people they feel attacked, because it's not only their own artistic choices that are being put into, that are being challenged, but their ideology. More than anything, their ideology, right? So there's that. I'm gonna finish off with that. Those are the readings that we cover for this week. I will highly recommend that you check on YouTube the video that it's recommended in the syllabus. I think the link that we offered has already been taken down because of, I don't know why, but you can Google that, John Berger, Ways of Seeing. And I promise you, as your TA, It's not just like, oh, that is not just me telling you do the assignment. Is a really cool piece of media. He's analyzing painting and how painting creates ways of seeing ourselves, and how art more broadly through photography on film is teaching us different ways of seeing the world, right? So it's pretty cool. There are like 4 different episodes. Hopefully you like it and you start binging on it. So but at least see episode number 1. These are short. They are, I think, 20 to 30 minutes, and these are iconic. This is an iconic work that keeps being brought in across different syllables I've seen. So it might be useful, hopefully interesting for you as well. That's it. I'm gonna see you next week. For week 4, we are meeting online, so I'm gonna send the link through the Canvas. Enjoy this extended weekend, and thank you for your attention. Bye.